Curse energy in the world of Jujutsu Kaisen is a mystical power source that originates from the negative emotions like grief, fear, and anger that accumulate in humans and flow outward into the world. And while some specifically gifted individuals can manipulate this energy, they aren't the dominant forces when it comes to the usage of cursed energy, as sometimes this energy will stockpile together into a spiritual being known as a cursed spirit, usually shortened to a curse. And these spirit strengths come from the feelings that birth them into the world, meaning the more widespread the emotion, the more powerful the curse will become. This has resulted in the creation of some very different special grade curses, some that are based on humanity's greatest fears, like the terrors brought on by natural disasters, be it land-based ones such as rock slides and earthquakes, or more water-based ones like tsunamis. Though, one of the most dangerous of these natural disaster curses is born from the negative emotions we feel towards each other every day, be it hatred, fear, or envy. They all formulate together into the major mutant molding monster mirthfully manufacturing manic malice and mages, Mahito, the cursed spirit of man. This video contains spoilers for Jujutsu Kaisen up to the most current arc in the manga. If you're not caught up and want to avoid spoilers, you have been warned. Now, Mahito is one of the primary antagonists in Jujutsu Kaisen, whose actions throughout the series have heavily impacted the lives and future of the main cast. He is a curse born from the negative emotions directed by humans at their fellow man, and thus, Mahito detests humanity as much as he learns from them, always growing stronger with each encounter he has with the main cast, and he strives to achieve one of the most human goals out there, to understand his true self and evolve into a superior being than he once was. Though, he does this all while believing that life holds no inherent value, and such, cursed spirits should inherit the earth, due to their perceived superior qualities. And due to this, one could argue that Mahito, in a way, represents a very different kind of natural disaster than his allies. One that doesn't damage the world around him, but more so the people living within that world. Though, before we discuss that, let's understand the meaning behind his name and design. Starting first with his name. Mahito's is actually pretty straightforward, as it's comprised of the characters for true or real and human. So altogether, his name simply means the true human, which of course matches up very well with his point of origin, as well as his belief and his personality, as he does see himself as the truest form of humanity. Mahito, in a way, has the freedom that he believes man's primal urges strives for. He does as he pleases and never feels a need to justify his actions to anyone but himself. Also, the characters which comprise Mahito's name can be found in Han Buddhism and Taoism as well, both concepts that seem vital to Mahito's own character's writing. Firstly, we have the Taoist interpretation of the idea, this being the Shenren, or the perfected person, who ranks above even the immortal beings in the teachings of Taoism. Mahito matches up very well with this concept, with him being propped up as the leader of the natural disaster curses, even though he is arguably the least matured of the group. Then we also reach the concept of the Shinrin in Buddhism, which speaks of the enlightened one, a human who has unlocked the understanding of everything. Mahito believes himself to be in this state already, given his views on the human soul, but a key part of his character's writing throughout the entirety of the series is tied directly into reaching that enlightenment, and I'll of course talk about that more later into the video. But overall, all the interpretations of his name tie into the idea that Mahito is in theory a true person. And we can see similar themes depicted in his design as well, as Mahito tends to take on a mostly human appearance, with a patchwork aesthetic to him. Essentially, his body looks like it's been Frankensteined together using multiple bodies from multiple people, including the eyes, which are heterochromatic. This is a beautiful representation of his point of origin, being a cursed spirit that is a byproduct of humanity's own negative feelings towards other humans. So, in a way, he very much is what he looks like. He also wears a rather simple outfit, with the most standout detail being the dark mantle he wears as a shirt, which helps obscure his hand, the deadliest part of his body, as well as making it easy to remove if he needs to. Also, this could be me reading a bit too deeply into the design, but The asymmetrical nature of the upper part of his outfit, where the left is more cloaked than the right, reminds me of a matador. And that matches up very well with Mahito's main approach when it comes to fights, as he intentionally tries to irritate and enrage his opponents to try to lure them in for close range attacks so that he can touch them with his ability, in a similar manner to that of a matador when it draws a bull in, sidesteps it, and stabs them. It also works thematically with his character, as bullfighting can be seen as a glorification of humans' reign over nature, a mindset Mahito seeks to punish man over, making him in a way humanity's own matador. Though, instead of stabbing his victims, Mahito will transmogrify them, using his innate curse technique Idle Transfiguration, or Mu Tenpen. How Idle Transfiguration works is Mahito can use cursed energy to reshape the soul of a human that he touches, which in turn mutilates the body with it, basically allowing Mahito to do whatever he wants with the person as long as he has come in contact with them. This includes shriveling their body into an easily carryable pocket size, bloating them up into a state of immobility, or even simply popping them or a body part of theirs like a bubble. Now, what makes this form of attack so dangerous is that you can't defend from it in a similar manner to other curse techniques, as Mahito does not attack the body of the user, but instead their soul, meaning it tends to override the normally understood curse energy protections that most sorcerers use, as to defend from this ability, you would need to understand what your soul is, and then shroud it with curse energy. Some can do this instinctually, as we see with Nanami. Now, the name of the attack in Japanese is actually rather interesting, as the first part of the name essentially means something naturally made that will never change. Basically, life as we know it. Idle in its foundation. Also, in a Taoist understanding of these same characters, they read out as Wu Wei, or to do nothing, which is a power and mindset acquired by the enlightened ones and some governments that wish to no longer participate in human affairs, while also gaining an enhanced control of those same affairs. Idle Transfiguration and Mahito represent these ideas perfectly. First, of course, in the term idle, being a direct translation of to do nothing, but also it matches up with Mahito's own views on humanity and how he can physically mold and shape those he touches with this technique, as well as how he believes he understands human nature better than those that he toys with. And the other half means to change by force. So when written out, Mahito's ability essentially means to change the unchangeable by force, or to upset the natural order of the world, which I feel is a perfect match for both his character, but also the deformed appearances of the transfigured humans that he creates. Now, the visual designs for the transfigured humans seem to take influence from the Japanese terracotta sculptures known as Haniwa. These were clay figures created to pay tribute to the dead and help guide their spirit into the afterlife. They were introduced into the culture of Japan all the way back in the Kofun period, and due to them being heavily tied to grave sites and their somewhat creepy appearance, they gained a sort of reputation as these malevolent and remorseless creatures in pop culture, while other Haniwa are thought to contain the souls of those deceased they were meant to pay tribute to, which gives the sculptures some sort of life in a way. So the transfigured humans' actions as these mindless killing monsters created from humans fits the current perception of Haniwa, while also, in a twisted way, matching the intended ritual meaning of them, by also mixing together Haniwa with other human rituals such as the shrunken head, to create these portable transfigured humans. Though the effectiveness of Mahito's curse technique is also partially based on the strength of the souls he's manipulating. Those with weaker souls cannot sustain life for very long in their new mutilated forms if transformed too quickly, so Mahito needs to experiment correctly. Along with this, he hasn't fully worked out all the kinks of the ability either, meaning that sometimes, even if he essentially lobotomizes a person, part of their personality may remain, resulting in the transfigured human retaining some form of self-awareness of their new horrific state of life. Though Mahito even admits that this isn't intentional, but it is possible that he might begin leaving these fragments simply to mess with the sorcerers that he fights, as he knows their cries for help causes sorcerers to hesitate, and he loves to cause suffering. Mahito can also use this innate curse technique on his own body, allowing him to reshape or heal his wounds, as well as change the shape and properties of his body to suit his situation, like changing his arm into a massive one or turning his leg into an animal's legs to gain their leaping properties. But this isn't just limited to living things, as he can turn his body into inanimate objects as well, like interlinking blades or barbed wire. Essentially, his curse technique allows Mahito to take whatever form or shape he pleases, even being able to create body doubles of himself to mislead attackers and escape danger. But what is this soul exactly? Well, from what Mahito can see, the soul is essentially the basic building block that all life is created from, and this is all life, from animals to plants and of course, humans. It is also where all human emotion originates from. Thus, it can be understood as sort of the origin of curse energy. It could also possibly be understood as the person's own personality, but given that it is found all throughout nature, Mahito continues his actions believing that life, the byproduct of the soul, aren't actually as special as humans believe it to be, and thus he sees killing people and saving people as ultimately equal actions because life holds no intrinsic value. But even with that said, he doesn't actually fully understand his own ability, or in fact, the soul, and thus he experiments and grows his curse technique by using the souls of the people around him to expand his arsenal when it comes to the usage of curse energy. And this is where we see techniques like soul multiplicity originate from, which is a technique where Mahito can force two or more souls together into a singular form. The stronger the soul, the more it will actively reject each other, and this fusion process can cause an eruption, which, if tweaked by Mahito using a bit of cursed energy, will cause it to overclock and shoot outward, resulting in an attack called Body Repel, which is where transfigured humans that Mahito keeps on hand lunge forward in a wave of flesh, sort of like the byproduct of a malleable substance being crushed under a hydraulic press. Though, Mahito can still mold this creature during the process, allowing himself to take shelter within it and attack from it. Though soul multiplicity doesn't only have to be used to attack, it can also be used on weaker souls with smaller amounts of rejection that Mahito can use to create new life in the form of his polymorphic soul isomer, which is a transfigured human that is comprised of multiple weak souls, which might actually undersell its abilities, as due to the massive cost of life, this creature becomes immensely powerful, with each of its punches packing enough explosive force to send someone flying. But the downside to this is that they have little to no durability, being able to be dispatched with a single solid hit. Essentially, they are a high resource cost for a glass cannon. The name also matches up quite well with the idea in Japanese, as it essentially means a multitude of souls of different origins and sexes forced together. This represents how Mahito creates these creatures, as he strips away the individualist nature of the human soul and forces it into one single monstrous form, essentially dehumanizing these people so that these creatures work better, which is kind of ironic in a way, given that Mahito's deadliest tool outside of his innate curse technique is arguably his most human trait, this being his endless curiosity and desire to learn, as Mahito strives to understand and perfect his own abilities in the middle of a fight, taking this childlike glee to each battle, even if they are to the death. And he was able to pick up on the basics of curse technique, such as curtains and vows, thanks to his conversations with Geto. He would go on to learn more complex techniques during fights, like Black Flash and Simple Domains, though the most terrifying of these abilities was gained on an account with his own brush with death, as Mahito gained a glimpse of his own potential in the form of his innate domain, awakening to one of the strongest curse techniques there is in Jujutsu, this being domain expansion. As he uses his innate curse technique to reform the inner skin of his mouth into an extra set of arms, he performs the signs required to expand his domain, his own self-embodiment of perfection. This ability takes Mahito and his target into a void surrounded by a near infinite set of interlocking chains of arms. And at the center, next to him, is a throne room made of hands, creating what visually looks like a lotus head. And all this together visually symbolizes that within this domain, you, and anyone else, rests in the palm of Mahito's hand. as this ability simply forces Mahito to already be connected to all those within his domain, meaning he is always touching their soul and can transmogrify them at will, essentially winning the fight the moment anyone sets foot within this barrier. Which makes it kind of funny that every time Mahito has used his domain, his opponent has found some way to counter it, but his usage of the domain is one of the best examples of his own learning ability, as thanks to his interactions with Gojo and Shibuya, Mahito is able to have mastered the quick release and ending of a domain in 0.2 seconds, which basically means he can cheat his way into a hit. Though, the hand signs produced before creating the domain all have meaning of their own. Firstly, we'll start with the hand sign in reference to the Great Peacock, apologies, I'm probably going to mispronounce this, Kuchaku Mayu, one of the kings of wisdom in Buddhism, who is said to consume the plague and pain of humanity, removing it from their lives like a peacock removes insects from the ground. Mahito works in relation to this in a way. Firstly, his whole creation is a result of a similar process, the collection of negative human emotions forced together into a single place and boiling into the surface in the form of a cursed spirit. But also, his ability can work with the idea, as he can reshape a person and remove their illnesses and pain. This is shown perfectly with Mekamaru, but Mahito would never be so kind, as he actively takes pleasure in causing pain and hardship. And while it's this set of hand signs that best represent Mahito as he is, the lower set of hands do even more, as they take the shape of the Nyore, or the practice into becoming a Buddha, or more specifically, reaching enlightenment. Which of course makes sense, as reaching this level of cursed energy mastery required Mahito to come within a brush of death, similar to when the Buddha would starve himself to reach enlightenment. And the idea of reaching this enlightenment is represented best in multiple aspects of the domain. Firstly, in the lotus flower comprised of hands. A lotus is a flower closely associated with Buddhism, as it represents purity or clarity of the body, speech, and mind. Once Mahito reaches this stage of curse usage, his first action is to thank Nanami for helping push him to this point. He found clarity of mind, body, and speech, and has become, in a way, a dark Buddha. But also, more importantly, the idea of being within Mahito's palm is very Buddha in nature, as once the Buddha reaches enlightenment, they become one with everything, best represented in an exchange with Sun Wukong in Journey to the West, as the Monkey King learned that the whole universe existed within the hand of the Buddha. And also, of course, as I mentioned, Mahito reaching this stage of evolution is a sign that he has reached his own form of inner enlightenment, with Nanami believing that he has become more than the Jujutsu Academy can ever deal with. And this isn't even the peak of his abilities, as due to his battles with multiple different sorcerers and all the techniques he's required, Mahito was finally able to mature into his truest form, this being the instant spirit body of distorted killing, a monstrous form which maximizes all of his abilities to 200% of what his original body could muster, though his hands remain the same as his original body, while the rest of his body changes significantly. His skin becomes extra tough and requires an immense amount of curse energy to penetrate. As well, he grows massive blade-like elbows, which allow him to attack at mid-range, with the blades themselves assumedly extending to reach the target at further distances, with Akatame-sensei even describing that they would work like the Senken Kogetsu from World Trigger. Also, mentioning World Trigger, the usage of a 0.2 second domain duration might also be a reference to that series, as someone can extend the range of their Senku Kogetsu by activating it for only 0.2 seconds. This can extend the range of the slash from 15 meters to 40. And also, while I'm mentioning the influences on Mahito's design, I think I should also mention what I believe to be one of his biggest visual design influences, this being Tomura Shigaraki from My Hero Academia, as the characters are very similar in physical traits, as well as both having a hand-based aesthetic. Hell, their abilities aren't too different either, especially so in Mahito's case, since it seemingly still needs his hands the way they are to properly use his innate curse technique in a similar way that Shigaraki needs his hands to use his decaying quirk. And Horikoshi has mentioned in the past that Mahito is his favorite character from Jujutsu Kaisen, so it's possible that these influences are sort of a two-way street. We even see cases of Akatame drawing Mahito's face in a way that references Shigaraki's own creepy faces. Then again, Mahito is used to reference other series as well, so it might not be direct. But Akatame and Horikoshi are friends outside of Jump, even going to see movies together and drawing each other's characters, so it's very possible that this is just an intentional, friendly exchange of ideas. Now anyways, Mahito's evolution actually plays into a theme in his character that has been in the background of him and Yuji's own rivalry, this being the legend of the koi fish, as at the beginning of the series, Mahito is a young, naive cursed spirit, whose greatest strength is his ability to grow and learn, always gaining something from each encounter he has with a sorcerer or the main cast, and taking on elements of the koi fish of the legend, who, in the story, decides to take on the most challenging path to reach somewhere no other koi fish has been, the Dragon's Gate, which sits atop a waterfall. He does this by trying to swim up the waterfall, which is a task that at first seems impossible, with the fish crashing down and coming close to death multiple times. But he grew stronger with each attempt, more durable, and learning different techniques to assist in his climb. But the direct path would never work. That is the cruel joke of the Dragon's Gate. This climb could never be overcome. But instead, the koi fish did something differently. He used the climb to build up his body to pull off a much more risky method. The koi fish abandoned the waterfall entirely and swam to the bottom of the river. Using its combined years of training along with this risky gambit, it built up speed and aimed for one place, the top, shooting out of the water like a rocket and clearing the waterfall. A 1 in a million chance gambit, and it pays off. Years of hard work and determination finally come to a climax once he passes through the Dragon's Gate. And the spirit of the waterfall, who had watched and mocked his journey all the way, humbly ate its own words and granted it a new wonderful body. The koi fish became a wondrous golden dragon. Mahito achieves the same level of feat thanks to his willingness to risk everything in the face of hardship, be it testing out a domain expansion technique he's never done before, or being able to pull off a black flash multiple times. This gives him clarity of mind, and allows him to fully evolve and obtain his instant spirit body of distorted killing, his own glorious dragon form, and its power certainly matches up with the legends. Now, what does this have to do with his rivalry with Yuji? Well, in their final encounter in Shibuya, Mahito makes mention of something, this being how they are one and the same. So, if Mahito is a dragon, that means Yuji is a tiger, which is actually something said directly in the series, with one of Yuji's old nicknames being the Tiger of West Junior High, which harkens to one of the most famous Asian idioms that appears in many different things, including a form of Buddhism, this being the tiger and the dragon, two creatures which represent the fundamental concepts of yin and yang. The tiger is a creature of immense power that charges headfirst and tears its opposing force apart with its shredding claws, while the dragon is a durable force that uses its ever-expanding wisdom to outsmart its rival. This matches up perfectly with each character's approach to fighting, especially in their final battle, be it in how Yuji uses his overwhelming strength to brute force his way through Mahito's tricks, even using Black Flash so consistently that you might assume that he could do it on command, or in how Mahito, whose main strategy involves either aggravating his opponent so they make a mistake, or moving himself further away from danger to try to land a single good blow on his opposition. You can even see elements of the tiger within Sukuna as well, be it in the face and body markings, but also in how his attacks relate to cutting and shredding like claws. And due to this mirroring nature of Yuji and Mahito, that means whenever Yuji grows as a sorcerer and a fighter, so does Mahito in response. If Yuji gains something, Mahito must take it away. And we even see this in the fight when Mahito is able to pull off a Black Flash with the same ferocity as Yuji. And it is only when Yuji fully accepts the sentiment that he and Mahito are in a way the same does he gain control over the fight. But when finally cornered and on the verge of death, does Mahito's actual purpose make itself clear. He, as well as the other cursed spirits in his group, were all being used by the true mastermind of the series, Kenjaku, who was piloting the body of Geto, and who only helped Mahito grow simply so he could unlock the true potential of idol Transfiguration, a curse technique he wished to take for himself, but wanted to wait until it had fully matured. This robs the reader, and Yuji, of the satisfaction of gaining revenge on Mahito, as he was simply used as a tool to jumpstart the next major arc of the series. Which fits perfectly in line with his character's writing, because Mahito is one of the best written antagonists in Modern Jump, and a perfect face for the series as a whole, as his actions throughout the story are some of the most memorable and weighty, and this is because Akatame allowed him to do one simple thing, this being killing actual major and beloved characters. Starting first with Junpei, a simple stepping stone. In Mahito killing Junpei, it makes it very clear what type of series Jujutsu Kaisen is going to be. It is not one where each story will have a happy ending. It's willing to kill established characters, who was fake foreshadowed into joining the crew, just so that the gut punch to the reader would be the same as it was to Yuji. Then we have him killing off other established characters like Mekamaru, right after gifting him a refreshed body and in the middle of a semi-confession from Miwa, a scene that you would imagine Mekamaru would walk away from. He dies ungracefully. Following suit, in the Shibuya incident, Mahito is one who helps seal away Gojo, kills Nanami, who is one of Akatame's own favorite characters, and then, of course, seemingly kills off one of the main cast members in Nobara, erupting the side of her face right in front of Yuji. And all of these events occur in rapid succession, leaving little to no time from each heartbreaking gut punch. And all of this while Mahito mocks and belittles the efforts of those he is killing. He is one of the most detestable villains, but in a well-written and enjoyable way. And what makes Mahito so charming is his writing, as he's written with this somewhat childlike wonderment, with Nanami considering him to be similar to both Gojo and a child, as he always is excited to play around with those he encounters and experiment on the building blocks of life that he calls souls. Hell, we can even see him playing games throughout the series, like soccer with Jugo's head, or the actual game of life with Chozo. Which, I mean, I don't know how much of a direct metaphor you need. Mahito is literally playing with life here. There is even some nods to Akatame's own youth in the form of inside jokes, which are only made apparent if you read extras. The major one of this being the book of poetry that Mahito is reading in Dagon's own domain. It's called Giant from the Cloud, and he doesn't even know the author, because in reality, the author is Akatame, as the book is actually just a bunch of Bleach-inspired fanfiction poetry that Akatame wrote in middle school that he considers to be rather embarrassing. And this reading of childish poetry and trying to look cool and educated doing so is a joke that makes Mahito look like a chunibyo, even if it is a joke that does not land unless you know the details of it, which reinforces his sort of childlike nature. And it's not unintentional that a lot of Mahito's worst actions are paired with goofy visuals. The best example of this being Chapter 127's cover page, which depicts Mahito excitedly cheering amongst dolls that are deformed of all the major characters that he has killed, and all which hold a significant meaning to Yuji. This is how Mahito views life and death. They are simple playthings to him, because, as he explained before, life has no value. Which leads me to the final aspect of his character that I wanted to mention. Mahito's evolution is something that I absolutely loved in the series, especially in how it parallels well with his former companions of the natural disaster curses Jogo, Hanami, and Dagon, which you can even see elements of each of their designs and abilities implemented into him. This is because Mahito is a natural disaster in his own right, just not one created from the earth, but instead the people who inhabit it. He is the embodiment of the mindset which terrified a specific mustachioed philosopher a century ago. This being existential nihilism, or the idea that life has no intrinsic meaning or value to it. This is also the form of nihilism that houses all others within it, as Nietzsche believed that nihilism was a catastrophe in the making which could destroy culture and man as we know them, infecting the values that kept people life positive, and causing them to come crumbling down. Be it belief systems, culture, nihilism is a danger to all of them, and it exists as a seed in any aesthetic value that prioritizes the life after the current one we are living now as a reward. Be it the Buddhist Enlightenment or Catholicism's heaven. This is why when Mahito becomes enlightened in his own way, he becomes twisted ideas on these concepts, as his mere existence is the devaluing of ideals, and this is best represented in his own ideals, as he believes that not only does life have no inherent value to it, but the systems and structures in society also hold no value, even willing to break the rules of binding vows, but had to be convinced to do otherwise. Mahito does not believe in rules and structure. He is the abyss of man, which we wish to avoid staring into. He reflects everything that they wish to to ignore about their lives, and devalues life as a whole, which is reinforced by his existence being tied directly into humanity. He is our monster, though it is in his reflection that one can rebuild and establish their new values on life. As the series itself has proven, Mahito's viewpoint is flawed. The soul and the body are two separate aspects that one does not inherently make the other, as we see with Geto's own body willingly attacking Kenjaku after being goaded on by Gojo, with Kenjaku even pointing this out to Mahito, who simply dismisses the idea due to the nature of Kenjaku's ability. But there are those in the world whose body has overwhelmed and consumed their soul in order to become something more. A man who stands over the world. A great example of this is Toji Zenin, aka the coolest fucking character in the entirety of Jujutsu Kaisen. And in certain instances, Yuji Itadori. As in the final conflict between Mahito and Yuji, Itadori is broken down. Mahito has shattered every value that he has come to understand in life, stripping him of every cushion life has offered him, from his friends, his family, a new home, everything. And, while at first Yuji does succumb to this nihilism and despair, his aesthetic values completely broken before him, eventually, he stares long into that abyss, that deathly, uncaring, valueless void, and chisels his own new meaning into the stone walls of life. He overcomes the collapse, and becomes the Overman. And this is best represented in his defeat of Mahito, using his own original curse technique, one that only exists because of his misunderstanding of curse energy, and that he only learned to master in his previous fight against Chozo, this being the Divergent Fist. With it, Yuji is able to completely wind Mahito, exposing his weakest point. And do you know the quickest way to refute a moral nihilist? And with that understood, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you want to support more videos like this in the future, I have a Patreon at patreon.com/MediNotTheBadGuy. And I also want to give a shout out to Kyle Anime Scouter on Twitter. Thanks to his efforts and analysis of Jujutsu Kaisen, it made making this video so much easier, as he had uncovered a lot of the hidden details in Mahito's ability names and the hand signs, which would have taken me so much longer to find myself. So, thank you to him. Everyone should go and check him out. He does some great stuff over there. And if you want to evolve past your own human form and become something more than human, well, you can be idly transmogrified through a copy of Shimoneta, A Boring World Where the Concept of Dirty Jokes Doesn't Exist at buyshimoneta.com.